Now, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again, welcome to Micah. Thank you for joining us. I am particularly thrilled for the session, and I'm sure we are as well. Before we proceed, would like for you to watch a brief video and tell us what your take on the video is. The video is concerning the session. So, Zainab, please, can you share the video? The volume, I don't think I can hear. Can we all hear? Zainab, I think there's something wrong with the audio.
Can you hear it?
Yes, I can hear you, but the audio.
Okay, I'll play it again then.
Okay, thank you.
You are 10 little resentments kill relationships. Do you have things that your spouse or significant other does that just, they irk you, right? Just enough. They irk you just enough to just make you frustrated inside. You see your husband's socks on the ground and just get bitter when you see them, but you don't do much about it. Your wife always leave a certain cabinet door open, and when you walk by, you're just going, why? These little resentments, if not dealt with, will fester and fester and fester. And next thing you know, you are 10, 20 years down the line going, why do I feel like I hate this person? I can't figure it out. Have you allowed little resentments to build and build and build to a place where you don't even know how to handle it? So double tap and follow for more, and we'll keep talking about it.
She's done. Please, Rukaya, unmute yourself.
So thank you so much, Zainab. I'd like to know what's our take on the video. Can anybody just comment or just say what your view on the video you just watched is? Would really like to read your comments, please. Okay, in the absence of comments, so welcome once again to Micah. Here at Micah, our vision is to see that Muslims return to the state of Islamic excellence. Some of the programs we deliver are, but are not limited to, Feeding in Soul, creating a safe space, leadership and competency, capacity building, encouraging positive social interaction, and promoting a passion for the deen. To become a member of Micah, you can visit our website, which will be made available in the comments in the chat box. And also you can follow us on social media at Micah Nigeria. You can as well subscribe to our YouTube channel at Micah Nigeria Lagos. So there's a message from, so there's a message from Zoe. And he or she says, Assalamu alaikum. Many people ignore a lot of little things because they don't want to rock the boat. I really agree with that. Thank you so much for your feedback, sir. So back to the session. Our speaker for today, as we all know, is Mrs. Ajia, Sister Maryam Lemu. Pardon me. Welcome, Ma. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure we're all familiar with who Sister Maryam Lemu is. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Ma. Thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, Rukaya. Thank you for moderating this session, and thank you to Micah for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Ma. So I would like to go through the bio of our speaker. So Mrs. Maryam Lemu is an international speaker and an adept seminar and workshop facilitator. She is currently the head of administration and resource management at New Horizons College, Minna, Nigeria. She is also one of the directors of ProStat Consultants, a capacity building consultancy firm based in Nigeria. Mrs. Lemu has traveled around the world, delivering seminars on a wide range of topics, including team building, leadership, and personal development. She is passionate about human development and character building, and helps her audience identify a sense of purpose and direction in life, and the positive impact it exerts on both work and personal life. Also, she delivers engaging public talks on marital and premarital topics, and particularly enjoys relationship coaching and counseling. Mrs. Lemu has a broad range of expertise, including public speaking, mentoring, and coaching, leadership, management, communication, and negotiation, to name a few. She also provides consultancy to private schools based on a strong commitment to character development, social responsibility, and values-driven leadership. Mashallah. Now, welcome again, Ma, and thank you for joining us. So we have some couple questions, but also like to advise guests to drop their questions in the chat box before the end of the session. So my first question to you, Ma, is, we cannot ask all of the questions, basically, but what vital questions do you suppose potential spouses are meant to discuss before deciding to get married?
Very good question. There's actually quite a laundry list of questions that one should go through. I created a premarital masterclass deliberately because I know I cannot even exhaust that list during even one-on-one counseling sessions. So there's a whole lot of things. First, though, you need to ask yourself a lot of questions before you even consider asking the potential person you believe you want to spend the rest of your life with questions. I always say Mr. or Miss Right are looking for Mr. or Miss Right, so you better be right. You need to know yourself. You need to be self-aware. So you also need to get married for the right reasons. Have you explored your expectations of marriage? Many of us go into marriage with various expectations. And I think that is often what sets us up for failure or success. Unrealistic expectations have shattered a lot of fantasies about marriage. I am a case in point. I grew up seeing a beautiful home. I grew up in a beautiful home. I saw a beautiful relationship in my parents, and I thought mine would just automatically replicate itself. Once we get married, once we say I do, that's it. I'll just have a beautiful home. I didn't know the behind the scenes that had gone into making my parents' relationship for 50 years what it was. So I went in with really unrealistic expectations. I didn't know that couples fight because I didn't see my parents fight. So I think, have you explored your expectations of marriage is one of the key questions. Because it's really important. What do you want? What are you looking for? Why do you want to get married? Why do you believe you're ready? These are key things. And there are certain checklists that you need to actually tick to confirm that you are marriage material, because that would-be potential spouse is also looking for someone with certain virtues, certain qualities. So number one, do you have realistic expectations of marriage? Have you been honest with yourself about the reason why you want to get married? Some people get married due to pressure. especially women, we're told our biological clock is ticking, all our friends are married or our siblings, what's wrong with us? And we actually start to believe that. So are you getting married for the right reasons? Some want to get married because they want to run away from a toxic relationship at home in what they're seeing, dysfunction in the home, and they just want to leave that environment that seems to be draining them. But you may be rushing from one trouble to another if you don't get certain things right. You know, have you been able to identify those things that you witnessed growing up that were not pleasant, that may manifest itself in your new relationship? Those are amongst the key questions you have, because many people, in fact, most people repeat what they saw growing up, good, bad, or ugly, unbeknownst to them, because they've not become self-aware to recognize the things that didn't serve them well, the things that didn't serve their family. Sometimes you won't know if your one parent or another is miserable because they cover up, they put up a good face, they don't want the children to know. However, there is an underlying current that one needs to recognize that is in the background, that because you've not addressed it properly could come back and haunt you. So I often say another question you need to ask is, have you addressed and, gone into yourself to identify the baggage you are carrying? Because that baggage can come and rear its ugly head in a new relationship with your spouse and your children. And then have you and the person you want to get married to dealt with your baggage, because you might be bringing trouble upon trouble? And then have you discussed what kind of relationship you want to have with your spouse? For some, it's going to be, the man is the head of the house and his word is final. There's no shura like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, because that's what the man witnessed growing up. You need to discuss these so that you're not in for a surprise. You need to discuss during the courtship period, once you're like, yes, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. I've become self-aware. I know what I want. You need to also discuss things like their expectations for children. And your expectations for children, and make sure you're on the same page if Allah blesses your relationship with children. You also need to discuss how many you want to have, how you want to raise them, who is going to play what role. Like my husband, before we got married, discussed everything with me. He said, I'm not marrying a glorified housemaid. So I know under Sharia, it's not your job to cook and clean. I'm going to play a big role in that. But even when the kids come, I want to be hands-on. I want to be deliberate. I want to be intentional. So I want to be involved in the whole journey of our children's evolution as they grow. There are seeds that I think we should both plant in them. So those are the kind of discussions you need to have. A lot of us allow love to blind us, and unfortunately we misroad. We can't see anymore because we're so deep in it that we end up ignoring key things. We don't ask the right questions. We ignore red flags. Allah, you're already praying to Allah, Allah, show me the right spouse. And then there you are ignoring the signs that Allah is showing you that there's something wrong with this potential person. Why? Because you're too in love, or because your family puts pressure and say, no, you've gone too far. There's no turning back now. You won't bring us shame and embarrassment. But it's not about them. But you need to also recognize it's not about you alone, because your marriage is your relationship between you, your spouse, and Allah. You're calling Allah to be a witness to your union. You need to know you're playing with fire, literally, if you mess this up, if you don't get it right. So Allah will question you. Once you go into that marriage contract, covenant, in the presence of Allah, whose name you invoked on the day you do that nikah, then know that you've got questions to answer in the life to come. Allah will ask you if you fulfilled your obligations to one another. Allah will ask you if your spouse fulfilled theirs and you fulfilled yours to them. So these are things that you need to know is not a joke. Many of us put in so much energy when we're going to get a driver's license. We don't put that much energy into getting married. Many of us, to get a new job, we do homework, we do our research. What's the company about? How do you climb up the ladder? What's the job description? And everything, schedule of duty and so on. And then we want to impress the boss. But we don't do that same amount of work when it comes to marriage. And many of us know that getting married and fulfilling our obligations to one another is fulfilling half of our ibadah. Imagine we put more energy into knowing how to fast properly, how to pray properly, how to do the sunnahs, the non-obligatory even. We do research, we do homework, we learn to recite beautifully, we learn to have memorize, have the scriptures on the tips of our tongues. But all that together constitutes half. Fulfilling your obligation to your spouse constitutes the other half. Yet that's the part that you see people messing things up. When you look at the state of marriages today, wallahi, I'm so scared about what people are going to say to our maker in the life to come because of how badly they are behaving in marriage and how lightly they are taking this other half that we will be questioned about. I'm sure as we go along, obviously, I have a lot more to share as to things you need to ask, but let me allow you to ask another question.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that answer. So my next question is, what is the difference between settling and, compromising, basically? I do not personally believe in settling, but then when people talk about compromises, what things can be compromised? Like when taking on a partner.
I call it deal breakers, actually. There are certain no-go areas, like you need to know yourself very well. That's why for me, self-awareness is key before you choose to get married, because when you are self-aware, it means you know yourself. You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and you're doing your jihad bin nafs to fix those. However, you also need to have a healthy self-esteem, know what you like and what you don't like. Know the things that you don't want to compromise. And that's why self-awareness helps, because for some, they will say, I don't want to marry someone who jokes with their prayers, for instance, or who is not God conscious and God fearing. And I think it's a very valid point. So you now are courting someone and you realize it's time for prayers, and the person ignores that or says you go ahead, and they don't seem to be taking things like that seriously. You see how they relate to people. Actually, for me, I tell folks that for you to know the level of piety, the level of iman of a person is based on how compassionate they are to Allah's creation. It's not whether they look the sunnah, they have the sunnah look, or they look Muslim, and they've got the beard or, the right covering. It's about the character. How do we treat others? How do we treat our help? How do we treat people who are so-called under us? Because Allah has elevated us and tried us with that elevation. How do they interact with people that they consider not to be at par with them? Sometimes people are at par with them, but they still treat people badly. For me, that is how you assess someone's iman, someone's love for Allah, desire to please Allah, and fear of offending Allah. So those are the kind of things for me. It's not about compromise so much as deal breakers. But there are things that if you look at and you think, if they choose not to change for the rest of our lives together, I'm okay with that. Those are the kind of things I say you can just ignore, because they are not solid things that could affect your relationship with your children. They're not solid enough to affect your relationship with Allah, and so on. So that's why it's so important you have that criteria. What am I looking for? Am I realistic in what I'm looking for in a person? Do I have those qualities myself? These are all things you need to ask. Some people have a wish list so long, like 50 things, 50 qualities they want to have in a spouse, but they don't even have those qualities themselves. So if you're going to compromise on things, compromise on the kind of things that if your spouse does not change during courtship period, during the time you're getting to know each other, you're going to be okay with them continuing that for the rest of your life. Because a lot of people think, oh no, we'll fix this afterwards. Wallahi, it's a big mistake, a disaster waiting to happen. You will need to make sure you're okay with them as they are now, not as a work in progress. Not as a science experiment that when you add a few ingredients, it will suddenly disappear. We're on our best behavior during courtship. And if you're seeing bad behavior during courtship, then Allah is showing you the signs. Take it that Allah has accepted your dua and is showing you this person is most likely not good for you. And make sure, of course, you do your istikhara during that period for Allah to put his stamp of approval and guide you better in making the right decision.
So my next question is, how do we manage the problems of resentment in marriages? How do we overcome them?
My dad had a saying that he often would say, which is minor irritations with major consequences. When I saw the video you played at the beginning, that is exactly what it is. You ignore small things, it festers, it builds, it creates resentment. And unfortunately, it's a recipe for disaster. When you have unresolved issues that keep piling up, and they could be very minutiae at the beginning, you're going to end up becoming a pressure cooker if you do not have an outlet. So for me, effective communication is one of those deal breakers. Like, you better be on the same page when it comes to your method of talking, because conflict doesn't destroy a marriage, but the manner with which you communicate can destroy a marriage. So fighting is okay. I tell people you'll always fight. In fact, if you don't fight, you're in an unhealthy relationship, because you don't get to know each other, and you don't get to know yourself and your limits. You don't get to check yourself. Because for me, when I got married, I was unfiltered. I said any rubbish that came to my mind. I didn't see my parents fight, so I didn't know how to fight. So my husband would often say to me, I'm Nupi, and so is my husband. He would say, Maryam, wama gaga. Maryam, you don't know how to talk. And I was like, but that's how we talk. My mom was Oyinbo, and you know how they are. They just say whatever without, though she was very polite and so on. But me, I was jaga jaga. And unfortunately, it was going to ruin my relationship. We were on the point of divorce about 6 years down the line because of the kind of fights we were having, because I hadn't learned to filter and weigh my words properly. So for me, I didn't bottle up. For me, I exploded and I said anything without weighing the impact of the words I say. So the things that will destroy the marriage is the way you speak, your tone of voice, your choices of words. So it is really, really important for us to recognize that bottling up, like here in our culture in the north of Nigeria, we're told to yi hakuri, which is just forgive and be patient. But I try to qualify that. And for a healthy relationship, yes, you need a whole load of patience, but patience to see the results of your efforts, patience to see that you raise issues and concerns that are bothering you and your spouse takes action, not patience to just continue talking and they are ignoring you and you keep realizing that things are not changing, or they apologize and they keep repeating the same thing over and over. Like, then you are a fool. You need to recognize that minor irritations, without finding the right methodology to express and address important issues. So again, that leads me to talk about pick your battles. Don't just fight over everything. Otherwise, you become a nagging spouse. You need to make sure you talk about important things that matter, that affect the relationship and the health and welfare, well-being of the relationship and of each other. So talk, communicate, ask your spouse, when I have things bothering me, what way do you want me to address them with you? And when things are bothering you, how do you want me to behave? How do you want me to react? You need to talk about this even before you get married. So when you get married and you've not done it, you have a bit of a problem, because you might be in for a shocker to find that, like me, my husband shut down. He literally put up a wall and is like, I'm not ready to talk now. And I'm like, but I'm ready now. And he's like, no, Maryam, this is not a good time. I was like, but it's good for me. And it wasn't constructive. I was being so stupid. So you need to find that middle ground. As I became a bit more mature, I've still not reached that stage yet, but I'm a work in progress. I started to use different methods. Like, I would ask my husband, something is bothering me. Can we talk? And slowly but surely, we started to now upgrade and improve and, evolve to where now, immediately, if something is bothering me, I was like, Saeed, something is on my mind. Can I talk about it now? And he may say, this isn't a good time. Then I was like, okay, could we talk about it when it's okay with you? And alhamdulillah, it doesn't take as long. We get to address and resolve issues. So I warn people, don't bottle up. Don't keep things inside. Try and make sure you find the right medium and convenient time to address things constructively with the aim of peace, with the aim of finding a mutually beneficial resolution.
Beautifully said, Ma. I think you kind of addressed the next question. It's also about communication. I'll still go ahead to ask. So it says, how do you revive communication in a relationship after several years of broken communication?
You have to try different methods until you find the one that works for you. So for my husband and I, when things really reach rock bottom, I know I called my mom. I reached out because at that time, really, divorce was on my mind. And I reached out to her and I was like, we're fighting all the time. We don't seem to be able to, we're not able to meet each other, halfway even. The relationship is not healthy right now because we just quarrel a lot. And I said, I never saw you and Baba fighting. So, how did you overcome it? And she said, oh, no, we had our differences. But what we did is just what I did. That's my mom is. She said, I would write to your dad because my mom couldn't handle confrontation. Whereas me, I like trouble. I like problems. so my mom, she runs away from problems. She prefers to do things in a more dignified manner, calm. She loves peace. So she now would write to my dad, and then he would sometimes just call her and sit down and clarify. They talk things through, or he may respond in writing. So I was like, hey, I can write. So I wrote my first letter to my husband. It was 18 pages long. I still call it the newspaper because I poured my heart out. They say I should write, so I can write now. So I wrote everything unfiltered. The way I stupidly spoke was how I stupidly wrote. And of course, it didn't go well. Because as I wrote that letter, I remember saying, Saeed, as I write you this letter, I hate you from the bottom of my heart. And you can imagine, they say, be careful what you write because it can be used against you in a court of law. Well, it was used against me. My husband was so upset. It caused another bigger fight. And I called my mom crying that it didn't go well. And after telling her what I did, she's like, she didn't know how stupid I was, that I was supposed to weigh my words carefully, think about Saeed reading it. How would he take it? Is it constructive? Anyway, I was like, but you didn't tell me that at the beginning. And she's like, I didn't know you were that stupid. So anyway, over time, I got to evolve and know how to weigh my words carefully. She said, always read it as if Saeed is the one reading it. And eventually my newspaper shrunk to like a 2-3 pager. And then after that, we now moved to me making an appointment. However, if you've reached a stage where your relationship is not going well, I can tell you the turning point in our relationship, and this literally transformed everything. I remember at that point where divorce was really on my mind, and I was just thinking, this thing is not working. I sat my husband down because often he would say, you do this, you do that. And me, I put a wall up. And, I would do gaslighting. I would do everything and try and turn it around and make it look like him. And he had his own shortcomings as well. But I focused on pointing fingers instead of looking in the mirror. So I sat him down one day and I said I wanted to talk to him when it was convenient. He sat, he agreed, we sat together. And then I had my notebook and pen. And for once in my life, I did the right thing. I kept my big mouth shut and I took down notes as I asked him, Saeed, please give me feedback. What is it I'm doing that you don't like that's not serving us in this relationship? What is it that I'm not doing? What is it I'm doing that you like, that you want me to continue? Then what am I not doing at all that you want me to start? And then what is it you want us to start doing in this relationship that doesn't exist? So these questions literally just turn things around. And like Saeed says, when he gives his own talks, he says, that was a big game changer. But he said, I would have been stupid if I didn't ask her to do the same for me. I would have been selfish if I didn't ask her to do the same for me. And to be very honest, if you want your relationship to change, you better both be ready. If not, why are you in a relationship? Why are you okay being miserable? Something has to give, and you can make a relationship work. Wallahi, if you know how low we had gotten, and how one day he said to me, Maryam, I don't look forward to coming home to you. And I was just in shock, like, you don't look forward to coming home to me, but I'm not the problem now. It's you, that kind of thing. Like, it was a wake-up call where I just had like, what? He doesn't want to come home to me? So you mean I'm also a problem? And that's why that self-awareness is a key ingredient to have in life generally, definitely before marriage, because it'll help your marriage. Both of you need to be very self-aware. Both of you need to be emotionally intelligent. So Alhamdulillah, once we did that, it helped a lot. Every 4 to 6 months or so, I would ask my husband, how can I make you happier? Is there something I'm not doing? Any changes? So this inventory, this ability to accept constructive criticism with humility, because it's not pleasant. Wallahi, you have to hang your ego outside if you want to grow. You have to be ready to accept that you are so far from perfect. That's why I've got this, my common phrase is, I'm a work in progress. So every day I try to push myself to upgrade, to evolve, to improve. from my yesterday. And I ask people to have the humility. When Allah says he has created for us mates, your mate is your buddy, your best friend, your companion. When you say schoolmate, think about that. We are mates. Allah, yes, he has elevated the husbands. For instance, I'm talking to the sisters here. They're a degree above us. But again, for the husbands, you have to also know there's nothing better than being married to your best friend. And this is, in fact, for both couples. Just focus on making each other your priority, your best friend. And wallahi, you will always look forward to coming home. You will always find that peace and tranquility that Allah has given us in this legal institution of marriage, inshallah.
That was quite deep. Thank you, Ma. So the next question is, when spouses crave intimacy without taking care of each other's needs, intimacy becomes undesirable to both parties. So how can couples begin to pay attention to each other's needs? For example, you have couples saying they aren't quite intimate with each other for like a couple months, for almost 6 months, 12 months, or even years, basically. So
very good question. I often tell men, women make love emotionally and men make love more physically. One needs to understand what that means. I don't know how, of course, this is Allah's divine design, but he has wired women to have so much jagwala going on in their brains. They're thinking of the kids, they're thinking of the next meal, they're thinking of organizing and being like mother hen. And, even a small argument or a disagreement will be in the back of one's mind, and the engine will be rolling, thinking about it, stewing about it. Even the look, if you didn't look at me correctly, I will overthink it. For men, they can separate intimacy from the relationship. It's like intimacy. We can fight now, but that doesn't mean I can't be intimate with you. So I think it's about, being able to meet each other and recognize this is how we've been created. I love the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus by John Gray, because it really helps one understand, how different we really are, but how to find that middle ground. I can give you an example of a friend of my brother's, because my brother just said me about this. He visited the guy, and the wife served them, dinner. And after the meal, my brother took his plate and was about to go to the kitchen, clear the table. And his friend is like, no, leave that. It's like, it's foreplay. So that emotional deposit in her emotional bank account of doing an act of service, an act of kindness, being helpful, is part of preparing, it's part of what seals the bond between you and your spouse. So you need to understand it's not just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, it's time for intimacy. No, it's a build-up for the woman. But the woman also needs to be considerate the fact that the men's needs are much greater. And they separate these things, whereas for us, everything is intertwined. So because it's disconnected, she needs to also know that he has needs and he has wants and fantasies, just as she has. But that's why it has to be a true partnership, because she needs to know that if she does not fulfill her man's needs and wants and fantasies, if you're not careful, you're going to open the door wide for him to look for outside fulfillment, which is such a reality today in so many homes. But the women today that reach out to me and are unsatisfied because their spouse is not romantic or doesn't get it, it's just like a physical, it's just a chore, just like an exercise or washing the dishes. Intimacy becomes like that, just a routine. Oh, well, I've checked it off on my to-do list. I've done that. There needs to be more discussions. What pleases you? What do you enjoy? What are your fantasies? That's why communication is so key, where you find the right time to raise these issues and you get to know each other's needs, wants, and fantasies, and you fulfill them. Because again, today we're dealing with a lot of women who are not satisfied in the homes. They're married, and then there's so much infidelity from both sides. And wallahi, it is getting worse. Just yesterday night, my husband and I were talking about this, how so many messages keep coming through. And sometimes it's the woman saying, my boss is flirting with me and my husband isn't satisfying me and he's my boss is finding me attractive. My boss sees my expressions that something is bothering me and is saying, what's on your mind? You look sad today. Somebody is noticing those things, which your spouse is supposed to be the one-stop shop for all your needs, all your emotional needs, your physical needs, your intimacy needs. Like, you both need to be there and present for each other. And, you need to be your spouse's cheerleader, because again, for women, you're making love to me if you got my back, if you encourage me, if you validate me, if you make me feel wanted, that I matter, that I'm important to you. So these are all things that one needs to work on. But again, go back to the drawing board. If your relationship is bankrupt of romanticism and, true intimacy, not just physical, but emotional intimacy, then you need to reconnect. I often tell the guys, you need to reconnect with your spouse on an intimate level, on an emotional level. And wallahi, what you call intimacy, the physical intimacy, will be on another level once the woman is truly involved and present and feels, we're both doing this for mutual satisfaction and fulfillment.
My second question, the next question, pardon me, is how can we make men feel safer to express themselves without feeling looked down upon? How can spouses learn to listen with empathy?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful question. Women do need to understand, because of the culture of big boys don't cry and men are meant to man up and not show emotion and express, one needs to establish trust so that the man can feel safe and vulnerable. You need to make sure. I remember my husband would tell me things in confidence, and when I'm angry, this is in the early years, I'm reformed now, I'm a better girl. But in the early years, I would use what he has told me in confidence against him. And of course, that would be, picture a snail going back into its cave, in its little shell. That's basically what it is. You can never violate the trust. You can never talk about your spouse with anybody. Wallahi, it isn't healthy unless it's good things, and even good things too. Less is more. I believe that as a policy. So learn to help your spouse unpack. That's why things like baggage for me are really critical in making sure you address unresolved issues. You raise, are there experiences you went through that were unpleasant when growing up? I have a bunch of cards that I'm about to launch soon called Connecting Cards. And these are cards that have over 80 questions that you can play and discuss. But it's not a game. It's actually real. It's raw. It's unfiltered. And it gives you something to talk about, to know each other better, to hopefully establish trust, allow you both to be vulnerable and express things that sometimes were unpleasant, but happened and are weighing you down, and you feel you're in a safe space. I'm with the person who will be my garment, who will hold what I've told them as an amana. And so for the women, that's what I advise. For the men, for me, alhamdulillah, I grew up seeing amazing men who cried, who expressed when they were sad, who expressed fear. And so we raised our two boys in the same manner to say what they feel. So say it. How are you feeling? I don't know. Describe it, so you peel the layers and go deeper into getting them to unpack, because it's going to serve them better in their future relationships. For the men, it's for your own sake, for your health's sake. Even statistically, if you see the rate, the mortality rate of men versus women, you find we who talk too much, sometimes too much, our own can go overboard, but that ability to just say and express is prevents that pressure cooker feeling. Whereas for the men, they could end up exploding because they have so many unresolved issues and they've bottled up so much and they're carrying the world on their shoulders, that you need to know the person you married is meant to be your confidant, your best friend, the person you can be your true self around, and start to establish that kind of relationship at that level where there is trust as the currency you interact with, because that will allow you to be able to hold the amana of what you tell each other, and it will allow you to be healthier and develop a healthier bond between each other, because you're able to be vulnerable and say what you're really feeling. So for me, I think that's the advice I would give.
So here we have, how does one deal with domestic violence from women towards the men? But I don't know, I'd like you to, like also talk about men to women. Basically.
For me, domestic violence applies to anybody. Any human being that is not safe in their home, that's a problem. And the home is not meant for that. If Allah has said that He has put love and mercy, mawadda wa rahma in our hearts, not that He's going to if we reach a certain level of piety. He says He has put. So where is it? And where does domestic violence feature? When we have examples of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and sometimes you find the most so-called pious people, the most knowledgeable, in fact, about the deen are perpetrators of this offense. They have this holier than thou mentality, yet they lord over their homes and oppress and sometimes inflict pain, in the home. So the same thing applies to women. Sometimes domestic violence can be the emotional abuse, because we may not have brute force. We don't have power physically, but our mouth get power plenty. And we need to recognize how psychologically it can make your spouse feel small. Psychologically, you can break your spouse. And I always say, marriage is not the place for you to deplete in value. It's a place where you're meant to grow and flourish. And if you find anything that goes contrary to that, then you need to check your relationship, check yourself, and then do istihara for Allah to guide you, whether this is safe for you, because it has a domino effect. Number one, on you, if you find you're being broken in a relationship, whether physically or emotionally broken, this is something that will affect your mental health, but it affects how you function in society. It also affects the example you're setting for your children, because we are passing on the baton, just like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, He is passing on the baton to us. And generations after him are meant to know the faith better than those who saw the Sahaba, who saw him practice it live and direct. So if we in the homes are meant to be the models of Islam, for our children to see the beauty of Islam, the beauty of the example set by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all we know is how kind he was. All we know is how compassionate he was, how he was very playful. And his grandchildren would be playing on his back even while he's praying salat. And you think about how we get so, aggressive when it comes to these kind of things. We need to be conscious of our so-called religiosity and to what level it's taking us, because many of us do the rituals. We pray on time, we do the fast, we do the extra, the non-obligatory and so on. But what's missing is the Islam in our character. We're not the walking Quran or the walking Hadith, where we show the right example in the home. So for me, I think when safety is at stake, safety, mental safety, your mental capacity, because if you're mentally broken, you can't function well. If physically you're being depleted because you're being bullied physically, you're being battered, you're not safe. You're not meant to stay in such an environment. Wallahi, that is honest. That is not Islam. That is not Islam. In Islam, persecution is worse than slaughter. For God's sakes, you are better off slaughtering a person than suffering them. So for me, these are the things that I want people to be very, very careful of. If you are doing this, number one, again, you sign that contract in the presence of Allah, and you will answer to Allah for what you did and what you didn't do. If you are persecuting, destroying emotionally, physically, breaking your spouse, whether you're a man or a woman, wallahi, you will answer to him for it. And then our children are our witnesses. We pass the baton on to them. What they witness in the home, in the examples we set for them, that they will replicate. Guess what? If they do see that this is how a home is meant to be, where there's chaos, dysfunction, physical abuse, verbal abuse, any kind of domestic abuse, and they go and repeat it, wallahi, we each get commission for it. And some people who are victims of domestic abuse say, oh, I stay because of my children. You're not doing them any service. Wallahi, they will resent you later for staying. They will resent you for the pain they feel when they're older and more aware of what they witnessed. Seeing you suffer, seeing you broken, seeing you dysfunctional, seeing you not able to give them the best of you. So you think you're doing them a service. On the contrary, in the long run, you're going to affect them in a very bad way. They will also be insecure. They will be broken children. And that also has a domino effect on society, because why is society so messed up today? Goes back to the home. goes back to the dysfunction and the chaos that so many witness today in how they were raised, in how they see their parents' relationship. So that is something that I say to people, if you're not safe, seek help, find a way out. This isn't marriage. Allah is not impressed with you sacrificing yourself because of marriage. That is not Islam. That is not marriage in Islam either. Yeah.
Jazakallah khairan, Ma. So the next question is, how can couples deal with the hard times, in quotes, financial struggles in marriages?
Yeah, once you have gotten into the relationship, sometimes you hit, hard times. Sometimes Allah tries you with wealth, where you find you don't have economic power and economic independence. This is where you both have to be so much more supportive. You both have to get each other's back. You both have to be more resourceful to see how else. Alhamdulillah, today we live in a world of technology where so many things can be done digitally. So you have to also be creative in seeing how you can get multiple streams of income, but you both have to be supportive. You both have to be frugal. You can't be so used to your highfalutin lifestyle that you want to maintain that, even though what's in the account is not up to what can accord you such luxuries. So you need to make sacrifices. You may have put your kids in a very expensive school, but you can't afford. I've seen parents, because we run a school, and I've seen parents have to sell their home, wallahi, sell their home just to keep their kids in our school because they want them to have that kind of education. So you do need to do istihara again and weigh, your options, but you need to also lower your standard a bit, your expenditures. You need to bring it down, and you both have to be frugal. You have to be considerate. You can't have one person making the sacrifice, doing all the hard work, trying, while the other one is just freestyling and still spending to impress people more than anything. Often that's it. Sometimes even just to impress their family, not to show them that they've hit, hard times. So this requires, again, marriage is about a partnership. It's about mutual everything. And you both have to be mutually considerate, and you both have to mutually make an effort to make it. I remember when I told people when I got married to my husband, he came from a very prominent home, but he rejected all the wealth of his family. He did not want to be his father's money. He wanted to start from the ground up. And I remember as soon as I got married, literally the day after, we left and went to America because he was living there at the time. And he was living in Minnesota. His car was a small little car, rusted, and we were just managing ourselves. And I came from a place where I grew up very financially independent because I was running a business since the age of 13. I was making cakes and catering. And my mom used to tell people that Maryam earns more than I do. By the age of 15, I was earning more than what my mom was earning, with a full-time job. So I was used to my own money. And so when we got married, I wasn't used to that. And, he would no, we have to be careful. I remember he would buy chicken parts, but in parts, not a whole chicken, because a whole chicken is expensive. So he would buy the legs, because it's cheaper than the breast. And me, I was used to chicken breast. I never used to eat any other part at that time. Now I'm a better person, so I'm much better. But then he wouldn't, and I would just be watching, he'll be eating me. I won't eat anything because I didn't see the body parts I wanted. And one day I made a fuss, he noticed that I wasn't eating, and I was like, hey, no, me, it's chicken breast I want. It's but it's the expensive part. And, over time we had to learn. I had to learn to start budgeting, because at the end of the day, I was now dependent on him. At that time, I wasn't working, and I had to be considerate. Sadly, just to give you another sad history, because he made the mistake of opening a joint account, I didn't know maths and I didn't know how to budget. I emptied his account, just spending stupidly. And that's when I had to have a wake-up call to say, you are not in your father's house. You are not independent. This is a true partnership. You need to have financial intelligence, so that you are considerate, so you don't break this man. So that's when I had to, and he helped me start budgeting and being more careful not to be a spendthrift. So I've been there, done that. And the best advice if you hit hard times is to go to the drawing board and be intentional. What are our expenditures? What can we remove? you need to lower the bar a little bit, and inshallah continue being creative, and you'll be financially independent again. May Allah make it easy and lighten your load, because money is a big source of fights and friction in a relationship. That I can say for sure. But may Allah make it easy for you.
I mean, thank you so much, Ma. So this question is interesting. It's on polygamy. So it says, how can issues of polygamy be discussed in an agreeable way? But then we should put in mind that, okay, we have some people who discuss that, okay, you're not going to take on another wife before the marriage. Then in the marriage, you're saying you want to do that. So how do you handle such a situation?
Well, yes, before you get married, you can go into an agreement with your spouse. Under Sharia, it is recognized that your spouse says they're not going to go into polygamy. If they move the goalpost, then they've violated an agreement, which under Sharia, you are now protected. Having said that, we also need to recognize that polygamy is permitted. And if it's something you did not discuss ahead of time and your spouse has certain needs that aren't being fulfilled and they decide, I want to go into polygamy, then you need to recognize that you cannot stop them. It's just a question of deciding, can I live with it or can I not? Can I stay and can I so-called share my husband? But don't make the mistake of fighting so hard that you go against Allah's decree. But when I say decree, I'm still not saying that Allah says it's compulsory to get married to 2, 3, 4, or 5. Obviously, the clause there is if you can be just. And if you can treat them equally, you must remember that. We have so many men today who abuse polygamy. They've not finished taking care of one family and fulfilling their rights and obligations to one. Then they go and multiply times 2, 3, and they add a fourth one. And each spouse's rights are equal. There's no seniority when it comes to polygamy to say, oh, this is the first wife or this is the new kid on the block and she gets what. It does not work like that. Allah is going to question you about how fair and just you were to each wife, 100%. So we have to be careful playing with fire again in that area. One of the biggest mistakes a lot of men make is, I'll talk about both sides, is the fact that they don't let their spouse know beforehand. The woman just finds out when the nikah has taken place, or I have a friend who found out on Facebook that her husband had taken on another wife. And you can imagine there is no way she will handle that properly. It's hard. She's a human being with feelings and emotions. So it created a crisis in the home because it was her friend that called her and said, oh, I saw pictures your husband had taken on another wife. Eventually they got divorced. But the women also have a role to play. You need to make sure that you do not push your spouse to go and marry a second wife. Are you both fulfilling each other's needs, wants, and fantasies? Or like I remember my husband was sharing with me a time when a gentleman who had not been faithful to his wife was justifying his actions. Like, okay, I bought lingerie for my wife. I bought all this sexy stuff that she should wear. And she said, she's not a prostitute. She's not going to wear it. Whereas he had needs which she was not fulfilling in the bedroom. No justification for what he did. That's between him and his God. But it's something that I always try to caution women. Do you bombard your spouse with wahala? As soon as they come in the home, you don't have good timing and you just shoot and start saying whatever comes to your mind at the wrong time. Are you repelling your spouse? Are you chasing them away? Or are you doing everything in your power, yet in spite of that, they still have something else that they need, which they feel this person is going to bring to the family? You cannot fight it. You just have to decide, can I live with it or can I not? And Allah gives you options there. And you can talk to, I'm not a scholar, you can talk to someone in maybe a Sharia court or a scholar who can advise accordingly as to what are your reasons, but make sure you don't offend Allah by protesting against polygamy. Mine is just let there always be dignity and mutual respect in how you conduct these things. So you don't leave one spouse feeling broken, small, inadequate, not good enough, and make this spouse feel like she and her kids are no longer, like I say, the new kids on the block or the flavor of the month kind of thing. I think it's the way it's done that I find very, it's sad. It could be done in a more proper way, in a dignified way, without making someone feel worthless. I think, let me put it that way. Yeah.
So I have about 2 to 3 questions left. So this one says, okay, what should a couple refer to when there are marital issues? Can you give recommendations?
Sadly, in the Muslim communities, we don't have many marriage counselors that you would say are experienced. We need more people. And for those watching, I highly encourage people to learn this. Of course, experience is one of the best teachers. And like me, alhamdulillah, I've been married 31 years. So when I do my marriage counseling with my husband, we bring this wealth of knowledge and experience and been there, done that kind of thing. And from counseling so many couples, we've seen so much, and we've seen what works and what doesn't. We've seen best practices, and we share that when we do marriage counseling. Inshallah, I know I'm working on building a marriage academy that inshallah will be launching soon in Abuja, and I'll be doing a TTC of my premarital course. So in other words, train the trainers. So I'm going to work to certify people to be able to conduct my premarital masterclass. The one of marriage counseling is much bigger. It's broader because you've got conflict resolution, you've got how to spice up the marriage, you've got so many tentacles to marriage that happen, how to deal with effective communication, conflict resolution, like it's so big. But for me, my little contribution is to at least start with the premarital, because if you can get it right before, then hopefully the problems are much less. Why I created my premarital masterclass, which is on my platform at maryamlemu.com, is because I want it to be accessible to everyone around the world. I've created 72 short videos that people can watch where you can check off all the boxes, and do exercises and watch videos. I send you on YouTube, I send you to TED Talks, I make you do Myers-Briggs course to know yourself. But this is something that inshallah soon we'll be coming up with. But what I would suggest is ask local Islamic organizations if they have marriage counselors. I know Nasfat have, Ansaruddin have, here in Abuja, I know An-Nur Mosque have, and so on. So there, you need to just ask enough. And there are some people who've been married for years who you can just go and say, these are the challenges, but you have to trust them. You have to know that they are discreet and they will give you the best advice. And so that, unfortunately, is the $1 million question, where to find people who will do that. But you can ask, and inshallah, Allah will guide you to the right person. There are other available counselors online. I know Hala Banani, she does it. You can book her online. There are other marriage. You can just do a research of Muslim marriage counselors on Google, and you'll probably get a list that you can now do virtual. Thank God for technology today. It allows us to do that. I know there's the marriage therapist in Kano. She's amazing. Her name is Maryam, and she's also doing a lot of work when it comes to helping people who are married deal with their differences, but also with infertility issues as well. So, just do your homework. Inshallah, Allah will guide you to the right person.
Okay, so this will be the last question because we have 2 minutes to the end of the session. What advice would you give to couples living with their parents in a shared accommodation?
Okay, so I do try as much as possible to advise couples to not live with their in-laws. It's good for you to have your own space to start developing your own unique marriage culture, not copy and paste of what someone else has done. Sometimes it worked for them, sometimes it didn't. So you ideally have your own space. It gives you chance to spread your wings. It's without being closely monitored. Before you know it, you're being close marked. Your cooking is one kind, your way of talking is this. This is something that requires space, and you need to feel safe. In-laws are ruining relationships today. Some people are fortunate enough where their relatives are so respectful, and they are captains of the supporters club of the success of your relationship, that they're able not to poke nose. But it is so rare. It is so rare. Before you know it, they will dictate when you have kids, how many you're going to have, what kind of food you should have in the house, or you should serve, which school your kids go to. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. It's better you cut the umbilical cord and live independently. For me, I think that's when your marriage will really begin, when you have no external interference. Because if you're in a bad mood, there's no way your family who know you so well won't know you're in a bad mood or you're having differences. Next thing they start asking, next thing they prescribe what works for them, which may not really have served them, but that's what they know. So for me, I think I highly, highly advise try as much as you can to be financially independent enough that you can live independently and develop your own unique marriage culture.
Oh, thank you so much, Jazakallah khairan. I'd like to commend your time management skills. We had so many questions and I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to cover all, but you did a fantastic job answering each and every of the questions. So Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so, so, so much.
Alhamdulillah, my pleasure. Thank you. You did an amazing job too, Ruka. Yes, it's a pleasure.
So I'd like to go to the audience. We have some couple questions, but I'm afraid I'm not sure I'll be able to take every, but so the first question I have is, oh, okay, so this was sent to me directly. Please, I would like to ask about advice for individuals that have no dating experience or how to proceed towards a romantic relationship, especially for those who are nearing their 30s. I don't know if you get the question, Penny.
Okay, let me think. I think I understand. First of all, I need to clarify the language. I don't think we Muslims should use the word dating. I believe in courtship because courtship means you intend to get married. So if you're single, if I understand you correctly, I think you should use the word courtship because when you are in a relationship with someone and you're courting, it's with the intention of getting married. Now, my father gave me advice when I was going to court my husband, and he said, don't ever allow Shaitan to be the third in the room. There's going to be temptation. You're going to be so in love and so blinded that you swear this has to be it. This is the one. And sometimes the devil goes to work and encourages you to hold hands. And before you hold hands, you start holding and touching and feeling and tasting other things that Allah will now not put his stamp of approval in your union. So you need to be very, very careful during this period and always make sure there's a third party, an adult, not one pekin that doesn't know what's up, an adult as the third party. When I was courting my husband, my father made sure that we always sit in a public space, like in the living room. So if my husband, my fiance came to our house, we'd sit in the parlor and the busybody amebo people in my house would be walking through and through the parlor. And of course, he's sitting on the opposite end and we're talking. Yes, there's privacy, as in nobody was listening to our conversation, but it was a public space. And that's the right way to do it. When I would go to his sister's house, the same thing. We sit in the living room, he's sitting on a couch opposite me, and it was a thoroughfare. People would come and go. And for me, I love and I respect the dignity of that because temptation is hard during that period where you are in a public space. You're never alone. So I would advise, and for me, I think you saying you are 30 romantic, please get that all out. You have the rest of your life to be romantic. Your age doesn't really matter. It's better you get married when you find the right person and when you are the right person, and forget about pressure. Don't ever allow anyone to put pressure on you and say your biological clock is ticking. What if you got married in 20 and Allah says you're not going to have kids? So it's like you may be wishing something, but that's not what Allah has written for you. So don't let those pressures get to you. Don't keep allowing anyone or tell yourself that something is wrong with you. You are enough. Just continue to build yourself, make yourself a better person, evolve, add values and qualities to yourself that will attract the right kind of spouse to you, and don't settle. Don't allow that pressure of age make you settle and say, oh, let me just manage this person. Don't be a manager. It's not going to be good for you. You're going to regret it. May Allah make it easy and guide you in the best manner.
Ameen, ameen. So Amnas Brooks is asking, okay, this question is personally for you. It's saying, do you have marriage counseling short notes, Hajia Maryam? Let's have the link to it, please.
Marriage counseling short notes. I don't understand the question fully, but I don't have short notes. I just have my lectures where I share our experiences. And, I am very open with what we go through. I'm discreet, of course, I won't give out names, but I do share what we encounter because I believe so many will relate and connect and will now be able to learn from whatever it is we have given advice, my husband and I, on the kind of challenges or problems people are facing. So all I can do is just say, go watch the videos. If you go on my website, maryamlemu.com, you'll see a whole bunch of videos. If you go on YouTube, Maryam Lemu, Facebook, Instagram, Maryam Lemu Official, you'll be able to see the stuff related to marriage and premarital stuff that I share.
Okay. Okay, another direct message. Okay. Okay, so there's this one. How can one learn to love again after a separated marriage?
Okay, well, when you've decided, let's say you've separated, you literally left, you've done a hijrah to a different place, and you decide you're going to get back together. I don't think you should just get back together just like that, because maybe people have pressured you. Get back together because you are starting afresh. Because definitely something pushed you out of that space. Something pushed you out. Before you come back, don't go back from where you were to where you were. You need to now recalibrate. You need to identify what was it that caused the problem to that extent that you left the home. And then come up with an agreement. Identify and recognize that you've both become more self-aware. You've both admitted to your own shortcomings, because that's the toughest one. Our ego often interferes and prevents us from owning our mistakes, that we were also part of the problem. So if you are ready to say, what is it that we are hoping to rebuild now that we're coming back together, I think that's going to go a long way to help you set the right expectations, but it'll make you more intentional as you enter the new chapter of a new relationship, reloaded. Your relationship is now reloaded, so to speak. So what is it you didn't do during the premarital that this is your chance to start again, to say, what are your expectations? What do you want us to build? How should we communicate? How should we handle conflict? Is it issues to do with the children? Talk about those things. Then issues to do with romance in the relationship. What kind of things do you want me to do that will please you? So that as you go back, you're going to be more intentional, you're going to be more deliberate, you're going to be conscious of that. And then one of the best ways to strengthen and spice up a relationship is to be each other's biggest cheerleaders and feed each other's spirit. Be each other's biggest cheerleaders. What I mean is you're the captain of the supporters club. You're the one who encourages. You're the one who says, you got this. Like my husband, I often say my parents gave me the foundation, but my husband gave me the wings to fly, because he's the one, when I doubted myself, he's like, Maryam, you've got this, what have you got to lose? And so over the years, I developed so much confidence that I own it now. If I doubt myself, I remember once long ago when I was doubting myself, and my husband like, hey, what do you want? An angel to come and slap you on the face with his wings and tell you you've got it. You can, and there's nothing better than, this is my spouse, this is my forever after, that's got my back to that kind of level. So when you feed each other's spirits with words of encouragement, validation, you got each other's backs, wallahi, that is intimacy at its highest level, because it builds trust. It means I know you care for me. When you pray together, pray for each other. Pray for each other's success. Wallahi, all these little acts go towards bringing really something fresh and strengthens the bond between the two of you in your relationship. May Allah make it easy.
Ameen. So Hussein Ibrahim is asking, what can you say about men who believe that taking care of expenses should be 50-50 just because the wife is a working woman?
Okay, under Sharia, what's hers is hers, what's yours is both yours. Yes, that is Sharia. That is not Maryam Lemu. Please don't be angry with me and start calling me names. This is Sharia. In fact, under Sharia, you owe her an allowance. So she may be earning more than you, but under Sharia, you are meant to give her an allowance that you both mutually agree upon, whether it's monthly, weekly, quarterly, annually, whatever, she's entitled to that. The head of the house is responsible for the spouse and the children, 110%. If she wants to live a lifestyle above what you can afford, fine, let her freestyle that and bring what she wants. But if we're going by the book, you cannot go against what Allah's decree is of asking her to divide anything 50-50. I remember things that I would do, my husband would say, Maryam, make intention of sadaqah, because he knows I didn't owe the relationship that. And my husband educated me a lot about my rights and my obligations in the relationship. And we constantly, alhamdulillah, I've done my homework now, so we can remind each other or talk about it more. But go and do your homework. And if I were ready, I would have shared with you. But Micah, what I'll do is I will share with Brother Abdul Rashid Babalola my my rights and obligations of couples in Islam, which my husband and I came up with, but we've had scholars, even my brother and so on, review it and add. So you know this is from scriptures, it's not from us. Your spouse is entitled to an allowance. Even if you are as broke as can be, you can negotiate and ask for payment plan or defer, but it's an entitlement. And that money is for her to do whatever she wants with it. Has nothing to do with household chores, nothing to do with the kids. It is 110% hers. So this is not something you can force your spouse to do. However, if you have a beautiful relationship and you both mutually agree that, you know what, this is going to really upgrade our standard of living to a certain level, and she is okay with it, but knows it's not by force, then that is how the relationship should be. So, because like me now, yes, we already have an understanding and agreement under Sharia with my husband, but there are things I want to do that I don't need to ask him. I just do. You know, if gas has finished, I don't go because it's like, you know, I just do. I need to buy something. I don't say, you know, bring money for this. I just do. He does his own, you know, he fulfills his obligations first and foremost, but any extra, I do that without needing to ask. And many times he's pleasantly surprised and he makes dua and he says, make intention. I hope you made intention for a sadaqah. So you can't take that part for granted. You can't take away what Allah's injunction is.
Okay, so Amina Daman, she's asking, how can one handle infidelity in marriage? There are two questions. So how can one handle infidelity in marriage? Then how do you deal with verbal abuse in a spouse who does not abuse you in other ways? Literally, how do you deal with verbal abuse in your marriage?
Okay. Let me start with the first one. Infidelity. A lot of women know that their spouses are unfaithful. This is what disturbs me today. A lot of women are aware that their spouse is sleeping around. They are cheating themselves. However, either they prefer to just pretend it's not happening, even though they know it is, and like, let's just maintain peace for the love of the children in particular. I often say, what do you want? You have to always know, what do you want in your relationship? If your spouse is ready to violate a covenant between you, them, and Allah, and sleep around with someone, they don't respect you. They don't respect Allah. They don't respect the institution of marriage. They don't respect your children. What do you want from this relationship, from this person who is not abiding by the rules? When you read about the consequence of that action they are doing in the eyes of Allah and what happens on the day of judgment when they are raised, what Allah does to people who do that, who are unfaithful, who commit zina, wallahi, you will feel sorry for them. But you need to decide, what are they bringing home? Could they bring a disease to you that could kill you? Is your life worth that you just simply because you want peace in the home, or you don't want to rock the boat, or you think I'm doing it for the children, and you now go and get a disease that could kill you? Like, there are so many things to look at it. So how do you deal with it? My question is, what do you want? You know, what do you want? If you're not able to sit and address and make sure if they say they're going to stop, they stop. And they are not just saying what you want to hear, because so many lie. And I often tell people, be careful having sex before marriage, because studies have shown that you will most likely continue after marriage. because you have tasted this and you end up comparing. And this applies to men and women. Women who have been promiscuous before marriage are more likely to engage in extramarital sex after marriage. So the same thing applies to the men. Studies have shown this. Just go and research it on your own. So for me, I just ask, what do you want? This isn't marriage. Infidelity is it's like the biggest violation of trust in the relationship. So what do you want? You decide if you want to stay in this relationship knowing you're courting fire. And imagine if it ever gets out, the effect it'll have on your children when they find out, when somebody says it to them in their face. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. So how do you deal with it? Deal with it. You have to deal with it one way or another. If not, what do you want? What kind of relationship is that? This is the only thing that separates you from a prostitute, which is, this is legal. This has Allah's stamp on approval on it because of that nikah. And then you violate that? Oh, what kind of relationship is this? That's the marriage, that's the trust. That's my forever after. That is my one and only, or two and only if you go into polygamy, or 3, 4, but it has to be legal. And then with regard to abuse, I think the question, was it that there's physical abuse, but not, or was there no physical abuse, but emotional abuse?
And I think the question is, there's no other abuse except verbal, like it's only verbal abuse.
So it goes back to that thing I talked about earlier. What do you want? Marriage is not meant for you to be persecuted. That is un-Islamic. You're not meant to deplete in value. You come from your papa's house to your husband's house. You're meant to grow. You're meant to flourish. You're meant to shine. That's why we come together, to upgrade and uplift the ummah in our own examples that we, how we relate, but in the example we set for our children. And if there's anything contrary to that, that is making you shrink, making you smaller, that is not marriage in Islam. Why are you together? What do you want? That's not why you came together. So you need to try and do everything in your power to fix that and make sure your spouse stops that sincerely. But if they have not, and you've sought intervention and still they have not, do your istihara, make up your mind you want.
Sister, I mean, I believe that answers your questions. Okay. So I do not quite get this question. The person is asking, how can one escape from peer pressure with regards to, marriage and relationships? Okay, that's like before marriage. Like, how do we handle peer pressure with regards, getting married or getting into relationships? I think.
Get married when you are ready. It's not about them. It's not about peer pressure. It's not about pressure from family. It's not about self-inflicted pressure. Get married when you're ready. This is not something you take lightly. You're moving in with somebody. You're now going to become almost like one in how you relate, because your goals need to be aligned when you get married. So for me, I keep telling people, be careful when it comes to external pressure. Get married when you know you are the right person and you found the right spouse to be, inshallah. And do your homework, investigate them, know their background, know the dynamics of the family they come from, deal with your baggage, deal with their excess, make sure they recognize their excess baggage and have dealt with it. Do your istihara. All those things have to be aligned. Like I said, I've got all the checklists on my premarital course, so it's something some may want to look at, but you have to make sure you've done all that, and then you now say you're ready. You have to be self-aware. You have to be emotionally intelligent. These are things that will help your marriage thrive. So you need to get all those things in order before. You can't rush it. You can't meet somebody and then a month or 2 months later, you say you're ready to get married when you've not seen how do they relate with others in different settings. How do they relate with you under pressure? You need time. I'm not an advocate of court quickly, sharp, and then get married. No. And it's not about them. Whoever is putting pressure on you, honestly, find a very tactful way to handle that. Be polite, be respectful, but remember, it's about you. It's not about them. You're the one who may end up being miserable and they will tell you, that's marriage, stay. You can't be divorced. Society will stigmatize you. So do it right. It's not about them.
Okay, ma'am. I think your answer addressed this already. How do you check someone's temperament? So I'll just keep to the next question.
Yeah.
Can you please talk more on female hygiene and how a woman can take care of her soul and body before and after birth?
Okay. Let me just make a general statement about hygiene, and this applies to both spouses, because my husband and I are dealing with so many cases where spouses reach out to us and say, please, could you talk to my wife? She's smelling down there where the sun don't shine. And you hear a woman saying, I lie next to him and his armpits are smelling, or, down there as well. Wallahi, it can be very awkward, very embarrassing, but we need to recognize there are some simple solutions to it. Sometimes it's even bad breath. And again, in my course, I cover all these kind of embarrassing things. How do you address it? If it is something like bad breath, you can have better dental hygiene. You floss, you brush more often, you gargle with the right kind of mouthwash, which sometimes people have various opinions about, but still, for me, I think that's something. Then use breath mints. If you know it's a problem, you have bad breath, and it's easy. Do like this and smell. Does it smell pleasant? It's not like a scientific experiment that needs to be done. If it is body odor, of course, you need to be very conscious of how well you scrub yourself when you take your bath. And how often, like my husband, funny, it was just yesterday, I was talking about it. I said, one thing I love about you is how clean you are, because he bathes so often, sometimes twice a day and so on. And it often twice a day, minimum, let me even say, is twice a day. And this makes you feel good because you know your spouse is clean. For me as a woman, I wash my hair every 2 to 3 days because my husband has a habit of putting his head near my head, his nose near my head, and I don't want him to ever smell anything wrong with me. So I'm very sensitive about that. So consciously always make sure you are keeping yourself clean. With regard to how do you do it? When you bath, always use deodorant. Some people fool themselves and they think perfume is good enough. It isn't. As long as your body is rubbing together body parts, whether it's the armpit or between your legs, it will smell. It will smell. You are fooling yourself if you think it doesn't smell. It's just maybe somebody has been lying to you or not telling you the truth. So use deodorant. And me, I always say, go the extra mile. Use whether it's roll-on or deodorant stick, and then use the spray. Sure, Adidas, all those ones that are readily available, and make sure they're genuine. Has to say antiperspirant deodorant. When you buy the bottle, the can, make sure it says antiperspirant deodorant. Those two things need to be there. And then for women in particular, I say also make sure under your bust, spray there as well, because your bra is rubbing on your skin, it will smell. Go and experiment yourself in the bathroom at the end of the day. Rub your hands under there and smell your nose. You know what I mean. But even the men, I say, and the women, you use your deodorant also between your legs. Yes, I know many people are like, what? Trust me on this. Trust me on this. It stops that odor. And then for some men, they prefer to just use the spray. Use the spray, but just make sure you're using what you need to do that will prevent the odor from happening. And then wash and clean regularly. Now, some people, especially scientifically, they say if you wash too often, especially with soaps, the flora in that area, you're depleting it. Do your homework. Even plain water that God gave you is good enough to really wash thoroughly. But me, I'm obsessed with cleaning properly. So I like to use my soft, gentle soaps, Doves and whatever to clean myself. So that's the advice I will give people. Whether you've had a baby or not, it applies. It applies. Just be conscious of being clean regularly. Like for me, as I enter the house, when I come back at the end of the day, my husband often, if he's home before me, he meets me at the door or vice versa. We go take a shower. That's just a routine and a habit. Like, I don't want anyone to touch me properly. Like, we hug, welcome each other. But after that, I beg, let me go change, be fresh again and start the next chapter of my day, which is my evening, clean. So be conscious of all these things. You have to. You just have to. And don't try and put strong perfumes on to camouflage smells. Your natural pheromones that come out of your body are attractive to your spouse. They get to know your own God-given scent. So that's the best advice I can give with regard to that.
Okay, kindly talk about intimacy and spicing up marriage in Islam. Is sex toys allowed in Islam? And how can couples explore this option successfully?
Okay, very good question. A lot of people ask me about that, and I talk about that even in my premarital course. Yes, they are not haram as long as they're not replacing. So for me, I say be very careful with it. For a lot of women in particular, especially if their spouse has premature ejaculation issues, they are not satisfied sexually before their spouse has climax. So unfortunately, this leaves them feeling empty because their needs haven't. And for women, of course, it takes them so much longer to climax. So I always caution that be careful bringing in certain sex toys that could replace what your spouse would do with you. So it's meant to only enhance but not replace. If you are going to use things to spice up intimacy, make sure it does not end up being the one giving you full pleasure and your spouse is no longer the main attraction. So that's the caution. Because we have a mixed audience, I don't want to go deeper into that. But I think it's important, do a bit more homework or send me an email at maryamlemu@gmail.com and I can give you more information on that. Let me put it that way.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes more. I'll just take one more question. Okay, so here, someone is asking, I read it somewhere that intending couples should discuss on sexual compatibility. How do you discuss this, knowing fully well that in Islam it's against, knowing fully well Islam is against sex before marriage?
Now, I will not advise anybody to talk about sex and intimacy before marriage, to be very honest with you. Again, it's courting trouble because our imagination goes to work. We start to fantasize. We start to become eager. Before you know it, you start doing practicals before you are legally married. So for me, I think you've got the rest of your life to talk and explore and go on an adventure of intimacy together. Let that be one of those no-go areas. And I always warn people, since we have those who are yet to be married in the house, if you find the person you want to get married to is pushing for that early on, honestly, they are not the right person for you. They don't respect you enough because Allah has forbidden it. So don't, no matter what, nobody is worth that. Your relationship with Allah comes first. What are his rules with regard to that? Like I said, spend the rest of your life having fun, exploring what pleases you, what are your fantasies, bring them to life. Try this, that, swing from the chandeliers if it makes you happy, inside out, back to front, but don't go there before the marriage. It's a no-go area. Let that be one of those, please, can we not talk about this now? Or I'm not comfortable talking about this. We've got the rest of our lives together, inshallah, after we get married to explore and discuss this. So which one is sexual compatibility? That's a 419 story somebody is telling you. There's no such thing.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much, Ma. I got some direct questions, not questions, but people are asking, how do you seek, they'd like to seek your counsel, like how do they get across to you? Basically, I'd like to seek Sis Maryam's counsel. How do I connect with her? There are about 4 people, so I don't know. Perhaps your page.
Okay, so yes, definitely, I think I've shared. You can go on my website where you have links to my social media pages. So let me just put in maryamlemu.com and yes, there we go. Someone has shared. You can send me an email. I have actually 4 emails. This one I would advise you use, or contact@maryamlemu, contact@maryamlemu.com, but at gmail.com. But this one is fine, maryamlemu@gmail.com. Let me just keep it simple. Send me an email there. Unfortunately, I am not doing counseling right now because we have too many couples already that we're on a journey with. And sometimes these sessions can last 3 months to 6 months. So we're just 2 people. In fact, many times when I'm so busy, I have to give my husband and ask the couple, are you okay with my husband counseling you exclusively, and they're more than ready to, alhamdulillah, because at least he and I discuss at the end of the day and compare notes sometimes and share thoughts, and we do indirectly do joint counseling, but I would say that right now my plate is full. I can respond to emails and counsel you via email, and many times I forward it to my husband as well, who also helps in counseling. So definitely I'll try my best to get back to you.
Okay, Mom. Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of the session, and before the closing prayer, I'd like to announce that Micah is holding a session or a program, basically, which is titled Meet the Eligibles. It's for singles and perhaps divorced, I don't know. So the program is meant to hold next week, inshallah. And for a token of 10,000, there are lots of interesting activities planned for the events, and would also want to let you know that all of the guests are meant to be on a mask, not nose mask, or I don't know, like a mask, basically. So we look forward to having you, and please look out for our flyers for more information. Jazakillah khairan. Ma, thank you so much for coming. Jazakillah khairan. I had a great time, and I'm sure that our guests did the same. Before you go, would really like you to, give us a closing prayer, if you don't mind, Ma.
Did you say closing prayer?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it very much. May Allah bless everyone that has shown up today. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullahu khairan to Micah for all you do. You're doing amazing work. May Allah continue to strengthen you. May this gathering be a witness for us, inshallah, in the life to come. May you continue to grow, and may you flourish in your relationships, whether existing relationships or courting relationships. May Allah guide you towards the one that He created just for you, and may your relationship be a huge success, inshallah. Let's recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamu alal mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ameen.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for joining. We hope to see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bye, Ma.
Alaikum salam. Bye, Ruqayyah.